Meeting is being recorded.
It's fresh for you too.
Yeah, and I'm
Hello.
flying. It's a totally new thing for me too. And then I go
Right.
to Gemini and have it generate the HTML code, which I then drop into the learning management system. And generally that works pretty well, but it's still a lot of work. It took me about 24 hours. Normally it would take me a month.
Hello, everyone.
Good
Hello.
morning.
I
Hello,
wish I had
hello.
a reason why I was a minute late, but no, I don't. Anyway, very good to see you, including you,
Are you in the
Fabian. Even though I
TARDIS?
can't see your face, Fabian, very good to see you. Hope you had a good holiday as well.
Frode, are you in the TARDIS? Just looks
Why?
like it looks like a black box.
No, no, it's just my little office upstairs.
Oh, okay.
Uh, so here we are. Right. And how is everyone today? Tess is back, which is nice. Vincent is here. Jim is doing a thumbs up. Fabian is doing a thumbs up. Oh, well, so much positivity. We might as well end it right there, huh?
Do we have
And,
an emoji for sixes and sevens yet?
you know, that's actually an interesting question. What would that be? If you look at how, hi, Peter. If you look at how 6, 7 is, I mean, obviously it means something in Chinese differently from. Anyway, that's a fascinating question. I'll think about it. Hi, Mark, and sorry about my very terse message to you just now. It was vocal done. I just, sorry everyone, I just texted Mark, please tell everyone I'll be a bit late then. It was probably a bit rudely written. But yeah, no, test, that's quite good.
Mm.
That's quite close. So, right, let me just find our URL for the beginning of today. We have a tiny bit of a agenda today and next week. I'll just share the link. So there we go. So Fabienne, how much of the emails flying back and forth have you seen of what we've been talking about for the January project?
0.
Zero. Okay, well that's a good basis. Brandel has seen it, so I expect he will be here in a bit. So we'll just give you a brief review, and the review is based on. I'll start it the other way around. So I got an email from Barbara Tversky today. Of course, always honored and very grateful when she gets in touch. And she said that normally to solve a problem in HCI, you would try to look at the problem, understand the problem, and all the things, and then you would find the best tools and systems to deal with the problem. With what we're doing here, it's clearly the opposite. We're more like artists trying to find out what a new tool can do. That goes for our general notion of working with text and XR, obviously. So, Fabienne, right before the new year, I sent an email to Vint and to Ismail saying, actually, it wouldn't be such a bad idea. I've had a job with this particular thing, a little bit more gravitas to drive forward what we're doing and be introducing people, be part of a big organization. They've all said, no, sorry, I don't know anyone. And then Vint came back with, actually, I know this really interesting person who is really, who I might talk to. So that name was redacted. And the reason for that is, I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but if you are trying to deal with a general problem, that's much harder than a specific problem. So when I wrote this pitch email to this person about why they might want to consider being associated with me and therefore us, because I wrote it in my personal capacity, at the back of it, I wrote, if you read this PDF, which is, 2, 3 page PDF in Reader, it can do different stuff, as you all know. And then I had done this music experiment that you all think might be a bit silly, and I listed that. And I felt really stupid that I didn't have a XR experience I could easily open up the document with. Because over the last 2 years, the experiments we've done with XR have been amazing, great results, but it hasn't focused on this. Totally fair enough. So what I decided to do then is spend this month, which is actually only 2 weeks because my programmers have been on holiday, programming in Author and Reader for Vision OS how to turn that PDF into a rich 3D experience. So that's what we've been discussing here a little bit. Going to do today and next week, and then we'll also have to agree what to do next month. So interesting. Thanks for your thumbs up there, Fabian. Hi, Brandel. Perfect timing. I was just filling in Fabian on the January project, the idea of the letter. So where we really are now is I have had an absolutely fantastic meeting with Dave Millard last Friday. I think most of you know him. He was my advisor. So he's a close friend to Mark Anderson and me. He's just an absolute genius, not only intellectually, not only in history, but also in how he understands us. So he's like gold dust. So he put on the headset and he experienced Author in the Vision Pro with the mapping thing. And whoever wants to, the link here in the chat, I'll paste it again in case Brandel wants to have a look as well. I think you've seen it already, Brandel. I spent 40 minutes talking to him about his experience. And it was so amazing because he is an amazing professor. So he's not talking from a naive perspective, but he hadn't used this particular thing. And even though, Fabian, WebXR is my preferred environment because it's clean, AR isn't because the world is messy. What Dave experienced was he felt these were almost like physical post-its in space. So it was a really long, wonderful discussion. It's all linked to from that page. But two things really came out of it, and that is he feels this kind of experience could be good for, as we've talked many times, a literature review or doing annotated bibliography, as we had worked on last year, and also doing a academic poster. So when Bob Horn emailed the other day talking about more visual abstracts and such, that is basically what an academic poster is. So for those of you who aren't in academia at the moment, it's literally you go to a conference and there's a poster on the wall, quite large, with a heading, boxes, images, all of that stuff. The point of it is to draw your attention, to draw in, so if you stand next to it, you can help elucidate on this. Dave thought that maybe having bits in space might work as a spatial poster. Maybe, maybe not. So after this long introduction, the whole point of this one single month, these 2 weeks, is what can I do in terms of seeing if my programmers can do it, is... Fabian, sorry, I'll just address what Fabian is saying. The video of him not being mirrored, yes, I did that with a friend. It's much better, I agree with you. There's a video further down on that page where I show me looking at the same stuff. So you being an XR person will understand it. A new person would have a problem, no question. So let's just look at this and call it research data for us. It's absolutely not the way to present it. So here's the final bit of the pitch. We have a small letter. I want to send this to this person, and I want at the back of the letter to say, if you want to view it in XR, click here while you're in XR, and then you can do some extra stuff. So for us then now, we can discuss what this extra stuff is. And finally, for context, the first year we worked on being seated in a swivel chair in a 360 environment, where you could read things. And then last year we worked more in a free moving, if you had the physical space, because it was all VR, you couldn't see the room. So if you had the space, you could walk around freely and do a lot of things, including, you've all seen it, that Fabian builds. This is different, only for these 2 weeks. This is literally a plane. You enter the room with a plane that has no 3D data, and then you can start pushing and pulling. So it becomes a cube. You cannot currently put something against a wall. It's all forward. So one of the many things Dave said is pulling forward seems to be a way of emphasizing. Pushing it away is receding. And then you have clustering. So those are our limits. And sorry, Mark, can you elaborate on your question, please?
Yeah, sorry. In the last part, because the video she kindly gave that you sort of took alongside Dave's thing, because I've watched through both videos. At the end, you do some stuff in Reader as opposed to Author, which I don't think is in your video. I just picked that up. If you're able to show that as well at some point, I think that might be helpful for people.
Yeah, good
And
point.
just a quick thing on what you mentioned. This mentioned the cube, which keeps changing its concept. So, are you saying that you can't move left or right or up or down? You literally can only move in the z-axis.
No. You can. Thank you. That's a very important question. You can move it in any way you want, but
So,
it's still.
what's the cube then in that context? Because I'm a bit lost.
If you look at my hand, you can move it like this, but it stays on that plane. So you can make the cube bigger, but it doesn't billboard towards me.
But right. So, can I see the edges of the cube? Do you project that? So, how deep does the cube go? And if it's a cube, then surely it can't be deeper than the width or the height of the display. The term is slightly confusing.
Oh, this is really great. Okay, so we've started the discussion now because those are perfect questions, Mark, and it leads to the reason why I now talk about all digital media as framed, because you use the term frame. This doesn't have a frame. All we need to think about is if you start working on the computer, the normal traditional flat computer on a map, you put things, whatever.
I was thinking that there are plenty of leftovers for you to have,
Oh.
figure out something for your dinner tonight.
Who was
Okay.
having
There's
dinner?
even
Yes.
that leftover rice that you could stir.
Oh, that was Jim. Right. Yeah, so you start with a flat screen. When you go in, you can do anything, but they will keep facing this away from that or point of origin. That's it. So it's not a real cube. So, Mark, it's a perfect point, but it does mean it is unframed.
So, actually, what I understand you to mean is essentially you've got an arrangement that starts on a single z plane. Everything's on the same z thing. May have different x, y coordinates, and you can move things in the z plane, but there is essentially no other restriction. I mean, all I'm saying is I think the cube, turning it a cube in this context actually makes it difficult to understand. If you just explain it, if you just say it's plain, the other thing is the fact of the turning is simply there is no billboarding. So that means that you can look at the cards or whatever you're calling them, the objects in space, you can actually see them side on. So you can, in this case, because you can't move, because the frame is fixed in space, if you want to look at the z-axis, you actually have to physically move to view it from the side. Or that's what my understanding is where we are at the moment.
100%, and you're highlighting some really important points. One of them, which is this is based on, we talked about the notion of a murder wall for a long time. A murder wall, when you see it in TV, you get up and move. So this experience is based on you have to move, right? So one of the things Dave really liked was you didn't do anything to move the room, you had to walk into it. So you walk into your information. And one of the nice benefits is you can see it from behind, which may then show different information. So we basically today and next week have a constraint of this. And I think there's probably a lot we can get out of it. Patrick Lichty, in response to one of the emails, said that it would be interesting to maybe see different colors and fonts and so on, depending on. But in the space, initially, when Dave was there, he felt that, he said that too, but he felt that it would get really cluttered. So we then talked about the idea of if you look at something long enough, maybe for a second, then maybe secondary information. Like if you look at someone's name in the work that we do, you may want to know, is this Mark Anderson referred to by someone else? Or is this Mark Anderson an author of a paper? In an academic field, these are two distinct categories. So if you look, it just says Mark Anderson, but if you look a little longer, maybe a little badge, maybe a color, maybe text, whatever. So that's why it's fun to have these very severe constraints and see what can come out of it. Also, Mark, the interaction with author is so simple. That's something I don't think we need to go in the headset, but I will explain a cool thing that he experienced. So when you open a document currently, you can have a one-page view, two-page view, or quite long. I think it's about 6 to 8 that'll fit. Can move it. It's super high quality. You can read it with great pleasure. And one thing that Dave discovered I hadn't seen, if you take your hand into the paper and wave it, you can actually scroll, which was quite nice. But other than that, Reader at this point is extremely uninteractive. Yeah, Mark.
Just a quick clarification. Yeah. So when you're mentioning, because I remember the bit about having extra icons or extra bits of metadata showing in the environment to show you say something about the point of focus. But essentially, the reason that's happening this way is because you're using Vision OS, and Vision OS is essentially has the additional benefit of sort of eye tracking focus, which you don't have in some other systems. But it's so essentially what you've just described is something we have touched on before, which is basically doing it in essentially you do almost like a vicinity-based decomposition. So the closer you get to it, the more interest you show in something, it basically paints back to you more metadata around it. But so I was just keeping track of the fact that the only difference really here is we're doing it using eye track and Vision OS rather than something else. I think that's important because if you want to then take the idea and extend it generally, because unless there's another device comes along, it's quite a small garden at the moment, Vision OS. I just think it's useful to keep those two things tied together.
Yeah, that's a very important point. And the reason I decided to consult you guys and have this dialogue is that it is a small user base. My team is tiny, the project is tiny, but it's very specific. So exactly as you said, Mark, this is in the same way that we had a 360 sphere year before, and a walk around. This is just another approach, and it's just January. So yes, these constraints are very real. Fabienne, your question here about the recording, there's no question you're right. It's just, as you know, having been here and in these meetings, I very often want to put a 360 camera on a tripod and just keep talking because there are some amazing people. In this case, we sat down, we talked about kids, life, politics, family, and then we moved into this. So it was really casual, and then I was just like, hang on a second, he just put on the headset, he hasn't seen this. Let me just hold up the iPhone for a bit. It was very, very unideal. If we get something useful out of this, we'll have to do what you're saying. And if you look at one of the videos that's linked, my friend Janine was in the headset. And what I got with Dave, I expected just to get the same as my friend Janine. She was like, wow, which is nice. And then I filmed the iPhone showing the mirroring just for a moment to show people. And even that little hack was better, but Dave just went further. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and to be clear, it's not a criticism. It's because it is. I've been there and I've done that also without recording the perspective, and it's still definitely infinitely better than having nothing and just like a chat without any trace. So it's great. But having the video, I think, as we agree, I think helps a lot. And I would argue that because it's not at a product stage yet, it's still very much exploratory, maybe that's a feature in itself, namely that being able to just pop the headset out and have a stranger or a friend or a colleague try with the video of their perspective is the step toward the product. So that it's more of an exploratory environment, so those gut feelings or those instant reactions are so very important and not, how do you say, either conflate them or misrepresent them, because of course, as we're close to we're excited by the process, at least I know that I tend to deform what the person meant to say. So I think my recommendation there is that maybe through author or reader in the Vision Pro, there should be a record feature, not for the normal user, but for this step in the process of exploring.
Yeah, I mean there is a record function in. I'm just checking something for here in the Vision itself. But would it be useful maybe if I do it live now and just share it with you guys for a minute? I see a little bit of nodding, that'll do. Okay, so the point of origin is here. It is the map view in Author 2D. You can see it's kind of messy, and you can see Marcus moved out for some reason. I'm just going to do, some of us are here. So this is just flat. I got some topics on the left. Even if I use this beautiful 27-inch display, it's not ideal. So I'm going to quit this, and then I'm going to share from the headset. By the way, this, I don't know if you can see, it's tiny, but there's a little hook you can buy for the battery. Completely changes the headset. The fact that I could just hook it onto my belt thing means it's so much easier. The fact that Apple didn't ship with an easy way to deal with a battery is a bit puzzling. Anyway, let's try to share. You can see, right? I can't see you. Can you, somebody speak if you can still see?
Yes,
I
we can.
can- Yes.
Yep.
We
Okay.
can see your hands. We can see the desk.
I'm going to turn on the
Yes.
left. Whoa, that cable was in the wrong place there. 1 second. Okay, hang on. Turn on a little bit more light for background context. You can see downstairs is where I was working last, so it's all the way down there. But okay. So here we go. I'm going to recenter the view. I'm going to open Author. So here is the letter. And if I now click on Map, this happens. I'm going to move it out of the way because we don't actually need it. So the workflow idea currently would be you have Author in a room, you deal with all these things, you save the setting, embed it in the text document, and then output it to PDF so this could happen again. So here we have concern 1, approach to concern. Right, so you see it's actually quite useful, not useful, but easy to move things around. So this is a different document than you saw earlier, hence the names are different. There's a little bit of stuff that can happen. Of course, the formatting is not brilliant here. And one other thing that Dave pointed out is because you can move it and get really close, the text that's shown when it's open can be it could be a lot smaller. You see here, these are the people mentioned there. I'm going to put that over there. So this is it, really. There is, this is a big one. And move the citations back and forth. Now, Barbara Tversky is there, and she's there. It's not connected because this is a citation which isn't data-wise in the same environment. And when I now click to open, none of them show any abstracts, which of course they should. Also, if you do something to try to edit this, you can. So if I double tap now, it's editable, but you can't see that. It has to be locked to this original document, which is not ideal. So I'm hoping we can have buttons under here when it's open for edit and to follow different directions, do layouts and that stuff. Any questions while I'm still in? Or comments?
Can you make the connections more prominent? Can you show? I see them flashing on and off, but are those manually created by you, or is the system doing that?
The connections are based on what's in here. So for instance, here you will see my name in this definition. Sorry. That means that it then links to me. So all the connections are based on, if there's some text in here that is in the world, there will be a line. In this space, it's actually very, very clear. So I'm going to make them slightly less solid. I'm going to make them more transparent. So that just means it doesn't translate very well onto the video you're seeing.
Can you look at can you look sideways on it so we can see what the links look when you look in from the side?
Yeah,
Once
very
it
happy
was
to do
linked.
that. It's so cool, isn't it?
But you could no, sorry, not that. Go back and bring up something that has a link and then
Oh.
go and look at it sideways.
The link itself, actually,
Bunch of cylinders, isn't
oops, yeah, so here's me. So there's no link as such. All it is because I mentioned, well, there's more information.
No, sorry. I understand. I understand. Basically, what you're doing is you're doing keyword-based highlighting. It's just to see the link lines is what I meant, and that's nice to see. So yeah. So you can still see that. So if you wanted to get a better view, because there might be obscuration by other cards in the space, you can stand to one side, or if you're seating, you just pivot it. It's the same thing.
Yeah, no, exactly. And an issue here is, if I now want to look at the desired results, it's not that hard to move. But if I then open it, if there's too much text and there's something, we need some method to bring it forward temporarily, as we've talked about in different ways over the years. But a problem I'm having currently with developing on this platform is, Fabian did all these amazing gestures. To develop that here without my developers having a headset is turning out to be really difficult. So I've asked Apple support to help us how to do that, because it would be nice if maybe, you clench your fist and tap and suddenly it's forward and then it goes back, or all that kind of stuff.
So there's no way to introduce color, correct?
There is. The question is, would we want, maybe, depending on user, maybe we'd want a kaleidoscope of what different colors mean, maybe not. I can't see that.
Well, so it's automatically generating these snippets and connections based on the text, correct?
All of these nodes in space are manually made by me.
Okay. But so it didn't split this out from the document by itself?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, hang on, that's not fully true. Sorry. All the citations over here, they're automatically extracted.
Uh-huh.
But they currently don't carry any useful metadata, so that's a matter of just doing.
Well, what I was thinking about in terms of color, you could start very simple and simply have name, location, idea or something like that, connection, and just have, 4 or 5 different colors that express and maybe those are user configurable, but then you can connect those up, and that would make it a lot easier to see what kind of connection is going on between these blocks. Because right now it's kind of hard to tell.
You're talking about color-coded connections rather than nodes. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, you can stick with a monocolor or whatever. If you want color in your nodes because you have diagrams and stuff like that, that's a different thing. But if you can have different colors that mean different things that show the user, okay, the reason that these things are connected is because Frodo's in all of them, right? Or the reason this thing is connected is because he's talking about building this with his developers, and he's talking about doing this in England versus the United States or something like that. But that this is a geographical connection, this is a personal connection, and so on and so forth. You can debate categories.
Yeah.
So one of the things. Sorry, Fred.
No, I was just going to say really briefly. The only kind of big surprise is that walking with many nodes is pleasant, but the connecting lines, to me at least, feel intrusive. It's like washing lines in this space. Hello.
Well, one thing that we did on the knowledge navigator is you can you have essentially layers, and so you can make the diagram zoom in and out. So in other words, it wouldn't show you all the connections, it would show you the strongest connections, it would show you, and so you could have that sort of thing. Or you could simply say, show me all the personal connections, or show me all of the connections that have to do with Vision Pro or something like that, or some technology connection or something like that.
So that's a very important other thing. So, by the way, this is what I mean by starting flat. This is the one you saw. Um, Using criteria for what to see and how to do layouts, I think is very important in this environment. Like here, all these people, when I'm on the Mac, I say select all people, and then I can do layout options to get them so I don't have to do this manual stuff.
So that was one of the things that I unsurprisingly, Dave brought up because, and I think back to a discussion about 2 years ago, talking about essentially this being another way of doing spatial hypertext. So what he was saying is that, well, we'd probably call it AI now. It's just a bit of software, but back in Aquanet and Vicky, if you put things in a sense like a list, it would say, okay, I recognize that as a list, and that would enable you to do things. Because one of the interesting sort of challenges here, and I was thinking what sort of raised by what Tom was saying, is you've also got two parallel forms of interaction going on here. One is the one where you're actually interacting with the notes, you're moving them around for whatever reason, the reason you want. And the other would be these sort of things have been brought up, like wanting to do contextual coloring. And my experience with using 20 years odd of using this sort of thing, albeit on a 2D frame, is that you actually want that's the kind of thing you want to be turning on and off all the time. Because part of the picture that the rest of the viewers can't see is all the stuff that's in here. So what often that coloring is doing is you're externalizing a notion you have, mapping it back onto the information you have, and seeing if essentially what emerges is the supposition you have in your mind. Annoyingly, it makes the interaction problem arguably more complex, or just we need to understand that there are two parallel control systems going on here. Some of it, I do think, in the way that we're seeing. I hate to call it AI, but the way we're seeing automation, let's call it that, moving along, is that the ability to do things essentially like detect clusters for you and pre-map them. For instance, it might be by moving things around that essentially you might get a tell back. It might be just a very subtle prompt to say, I think you've created a structure here, which is useful in two ways. Either you did and you meant to, which is good, or you didn't mean to, and it's useful to know that you've created something that other actors working on this information may misunderstand as being something you didn't intend. Obviously, it's just yourself, but even for yourself, it's a good tell back. Oh, okay. Am I making this sort of assertion of the relationship between these objects or not? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Tess, please.
I apologize because I realize I'm somewhat at a disadvantage, not really having a headset myself to try this stuff. I just kind of watch what's happening. But I think you have developed and Fabian has developed like a lot of really great interfaces and great visuals and gone back and forth on different movements and things. But it just occurs to me that maybe, I'd love to see a group of people who weren't us with a task. Like, I'd love to see just here's this, what do you think? Just a very informal thing, not necessarily beta testing, but then what is the task? Like give them a task, have them send you a document, have them work in that document, but that sort of thing. Because I feel like, we don't know until we hear from like you guys have done so much cool stuff. We need to see what other people think and how they interact and what their thoughts are, because we have a very stylized thing and we're with this week in, week out.
So two things on that, because yes, actually three things. Number one, agree. It is very, very important. And of course, that's what the experience with Dave Millard was. Mm-hmm. Because he's not been that interested in XR, but he's been very interested in hypertext. And what Mark was talking about now with spatialized information was something he very much went into. Of course, there's also a song about this if you go to the recording. Using music to think different is really weird. But also, what we're doing right now, this month, is the opposite. So equally true, whatever, I'm not going to do the numbers, but um, it's like we're artists and we've been given this new set of paints. Let's say we've only been doing oil and now it's watercolors. Like, what can we do? What kind of images can this make? So it's the complete opposite of what you would do with proper HCI or proper project. This is an artistic endeavor, right?
Well,
And the reason I'm so
yeah.
excited to share this with you is because initially, unfortunately, there are so many constraints. I mean, remember the first Mac, the first iPhone, the operating systems were really, really constrained. The constraint on the Vision of OS is, of course, it's bigger, but there's still real constraints. So as artists, that gives us an opportunity to not be able to do everything. Right? When we go back next month, hopefully to WebXR and so on, we have a completely different set of things. Right now, we just got to figure out, and if we think of this, it's a letter, it's a pitch to show one thing. XR can do some things in an interesting way. That's it.
Well, I mean, I don't know if this is useful or not, but my third thought watching this is if we're just talking, what can we do with this new tool? What can we do with this new paint box? One thing that occurs to me watching the way things are connecting, and there's a ton of applications for this, but the first one that comes to mind is my contacts. If I had if I could visualize my contacts, I'm sure all of us have people in our contact list who are friends, family, business associates, also merge there. You can it would be great to be able to find the connections between people. What? Wait, I'm sorry. Yes.
No, opposite of sorry. I really think, and let's see what the rest of the room feels like. Maybe the February project should be contact list in XR. What would that be? Is
Well,
it
and,
just
and
friends? Is it professional? Is it academic authors? But only a focus where the node itself, so to speak, is the person and everything revolves around the person. It's not document centric. But that would be fantastic, Tess. What does everyone else think?
Well, I mean, and just to explain like what I'm thinking when I'm, in my day, I might need to find who do I know who's worked at NBC? Just broad example. Who do I know who knows this person over here? Who do I know who has been in the XR space? Who do I know who likes to go to Italy? Who do I know who I have to call about, so and so's birthday party? And being able to link those things and see them like, okay, this is the group of people that all know Frode, or this is the group of people that I can reach out to about this, this job or something. That I think is what I see one of the many things I see when I see this.
So this is very, very cool because first of all, the example there you could probably do with a query. Just to
Hmm.
pour a little bit of cold water on something that I hugely agree with that we should do. And then at the same time, looking at Mark's most recent, what pictures can we make? Is the value only in the visible? This is where it gets exciting with these kinds of questions, right? Because you probably wouldn't want to go in, put the headset on, and then load up the people finder or environment, whatever the heck it would be called, to do only that. You would probably do it to see, Fabian, you're 2 steps ahead of me, to see the relationships and to build them, right? Just being able to use a globe on that could be cool.
Hmm.
If you can have, in addition to card dev and B card export, Fabian, which I'm really excited about, VCal as well. You can have your calendar in there, right?
Hmm.
So we can start doing the relationship over time with people. But what's exciting about doing, I think anyway, this kind of project-based approach for fun, we're not doing that now at all. So January has nothing to do with that. Right?
No, no.
No. So that's why it could be so exciting to February, do only that, and then look at other months where we pitch into like, okay, whether we build it for real or not is kind of irrelevant, but to have a discussion around a product idea, I think is really cool. Vincent, you're gonna have to speak it.
No, I was just saying on Tess's thing there about the contacts there, that was very much the original idea behind LinkedIn, was to allow people to connect in ways they wouldn't normally be able to get there, long before it turned into the corporate Facebook behemoth we now have. But yeah, that was its original set out, was that premise, exactly that. How could you find people, not necessarily through, but friends of friends, etc., and who has linked interests? So you'd be really hitting at a very, as you said, an idea there in terms of product development is huge.
And if I could just say, I was going to type to Mark, but I don't know if this is what you were talking about with it, is the visual value only what is visual. My where I'm leaning right now when I want to interact with things is I kind of really need a visual. I kind of need something that's like off this and like, okay, oh, to see these groups of people and to see that there's overlap between these people and or whatever the thing is. I do find that more useful for some reason these days. And I don't know if my brain just needs that stimulation because it's being pulled in so many different directions or not.
Yeah.
No, I think that actually, fun enough, I mean, I think that different people are differently situated. In fact, most of us, depending on the task we're doing, react differently to this. Sometimes we actually we do want almost an entirely visible thing. In other words, if I can't see it, it's not in the current display. And other times you almost want the opposite, because what you're actually trying to look at is the relationships, and you don't need all this extra sensory input to tell you something that in essence you already know. And in fact, it's obscuring all the subtle bits you're trying to find. So the frustrating thing, and I mean, this certainly comes from experience in general knowledge mapping tools, is this is a constant problem, because if you over optimize for one, you get a much lesser experience for others. So that is a valid challenge here, and I don't pretend to know the answer to that.
So the several issues have come up, and I would like to say that we need to develop the infrastructures to test some of these things, which is why I'm so, as Fabian would say, obsessed with metadata and data. Whether we're doing this letter, whether we're doing citations or the people next month, there needs to be a lot of stuff there so we can do it in the environment. And Vincent, you were talking earlier about how would these environments be controlled? I think you wrote about that. One of the things Dave talked a lot about was AI control of layouts, which is not necessarily aligned with what we're doing, but logically, there's no reason you can say, and when I use the word say, I mean speak, click a button, type something, do a gesture. It can mean a lot, right? All people on the left. Make a column out of what I've selected. These are really, really important things. So it's really fun to talk about this in a wider thing rather than just very, very literal. Brendel, please.
I would absolutely agree that layout in a context like that is absolutely everything. I do believe that people using the term AI to describe what that is sort of simultaneously Deus ex machina and not really descriptive of what it is that an AI is going to do. And so if you want to look at how people actually do layout well, then disciplines like social network analysis have an excellent pedigree of arranging things and pruning by degree, or making use of things like the Coral Heron fast multiscale kind of representations that just look at the node connection sizes in order to be able to build what is a surprisingly useful kind of arrangement. And I think that those are absolutely critical. If you have the ability to pull in or lean on a library that has the ability to do some kind of graph visualization, then that is very useful. It may be the case that something like an artificial intelligence has the ability to wrangle and wield those things. But the most important thing is to have reasonable handles over which you can kind of conceive of what layout actually entails. And if you do it or if AI does it or whatever, those things have names and those things have strategies, and somebody's got to do it.
let me just show you this real quick for that part of the discussion. Just sharing a bit. So if we go back here to this thing, so it's a bit messy, but if I do this, it's a keyboard shortcut, absolutely option 1. I've selected everybody tagged as a person. So now I can do, oh yeah, this is a buggy document. Yeah, I can, when I select more than one thing, I can do these, right? Layouts. You know, left, we can do, and you don't have to memorize them, because if you have, you can even do sorting. So we can make that sort horizontal. It goes a bit mad like this. These are obvious things that happens in a lot of design software, right? So we should be able to speak that and be able to do the equivalent of something quickly here. Right, so now I'm going to do this. Now it's tidied again. Very often we do want it tidy. And then we want to be able to do this. These are all the things associated with Mark. Everything else is hidden. The thing is, we're kind of spoilt with keyboard shortcut for those of us who care to use them, because they're incredibly powerful. You know, when Doug went to see Steve Jobs and they argued over the 1 or 2 button mice, I'm really surprised that, according to the law anyway, that Steve Jobs didn't say, what are you talking about? We have at least a 5-button mouse. We have click, double click, command click, option click, control click, shift click. These are proper things. If you're a Photoshop person or any kind of designer, you're going to use all of those. We haven't got the gestures yet. Towards the end of last year, Fabian started doing the gloves, I would call it, Fabian, you know, the green things, so we can start designing things. It's going to be a hugely important thing, because I don't want to have to be sitting in Blade Runner saying, zoom in, L37, click, click, click. I mean, that's ridiculous. Sometimes voice is great, but to select all people, align them on the left, equally spaced, and move them to the left side of my room is a lot easier with a keyboard shortcut. Tom has thoughts.
Well, actually, what you just showed me triggered back to what I was talking about earlier. You have subjects along the top that maybe are automatically extracted, and then you have people along the side. Could you make those different colors so that the people are all blue and the subjects are all green or something like that? I'm not talking about millions of colors. I'm talking about, for starters, at least, for sure, just a few to help you with that visual navigation some. Because if you put that into the XR experience, I think that gets equally messy, or AR experience, it gets even more messy. And if they're not natural colors, if they're pure colors in the sense of red, blue, green, that you're not going to see generally in the environment, you're not going to go into an actual red room, then they should stand out against the background as well. So, and it's also going to make it easier visually for your eye to connect those things up. So anyway, but you've already got the structures. What I'm saying, just add color.
Well, okay. So this is my answer to this. Having been born of an artistic temperament, color is really, really, really important to me. Which is why most of my photography is black and white, because color is a really big deal. So in the outline view and author, we've already started experimenting with color. So if you do it without color, the default, click on outline, you get the outline. This is our book. Some of the highlighted text is there, but if I now click on keywords, it finds keywords and it puts them in a column, right? Which is actually not that useful. So let's go to the settings and click color keywords on. Go to outline again, go to keywords. Now we have some color. I'm really annoyed to find it quite useless. But that might be because I did it. So Tom, I'm not at all saying you're wrong. Please, let's have that as a really important base point here. It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that for me here, I did like products are blue, community people are orange, and then, philosophy, it's just, But if we
I,
go,
I think that has some utility even there, but I think the bigger issue there is you are dealing with text, and so it's a linear top to bottom. You have to scroll back and forth to see it. You're not going to see all the colors together, and that sort of thing. Whereas if you're in a 2D or 3D environment, you'll see those connections much more clearly, and not just the text that color, but also the clusters, the way those texts go together. So, I mean, I think part of the reason that you find that underwhelming is because you're looking at text. You're looking at a unidirectional document and putting in a multi-directional dimension to it. It's like I remember Scott McCloud was talking in his TED talk about 20 years ago about when they first did comics on CD-ROMs, they would have a link and then it would take you up to a different area and then you come back to the comic. And he said that didn't work because it ruined the narrative flow,
yeah,
right? But if that comic were a mosaic, which he then shows later on, then you've got a different narrative framework to work in. So I think part of the problem you have there is the fact that it's linear.
yeah, but I mean, so what you have here in this map view is two things: define concepts and or citations. Now it's only showing citations because I don't think we've done anything. So we do have visual distinction. So if I now define Ted Nelson as a person, he appears italic, so it's like a signature.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite subtle, but we are looking at different ways of showing different kinds of data. I should delete this.
See, the thing is, I don't think subtle works really well, at least in the environment that you were showing a minute ago, because of the background noise. Maybe it'll work better if it's like a blank room or something like that. But I think I think you need to. I don't think you want subtle. I think subtle makes sense on paper, but I don't think it makes sense in an XR environment.
I think this is an example of where I would really like to see specific mockups,
Mm.
because also in our divergent community here, we have very different senses of aesthetics. Like for some reason, some more technical people often like purples and pinks and those strong colors. Others don't. So it comes down to, first of all, very strong personal preference. Also, how eyes respond to it, which is why we have dark mode, light modes on our devices, right? But whether or not we do exactly what you said, Tom, we do need the ways where we can address different aspects, whether it's
Hmm.
visually or by speaking to an AI or by doing a layout based on it. There's nothing wrong with the notion of saying, show everybody who was cited not only this person, but also that person and that kind of stuff. So, no question. Um, can you give, yeah. I mean, Tess, in Author, play around a little bit with the color palette we have there as an option, because the reason the color palette is what it is in Author is a lot of testing of differentiated colors that work in dark and light mode. There aren't that many colors. Like the difference between a light and a dark green, or saturated or not saturated, is quite small if you don't have them next to each other, it turns out. One of the interesting exceptions is brown and orange, which is of course the same color. The only difference is darkness. That works quite well, but a lot of them, there aren't that many.
You couldn't do thematically, and I'm talking specifically for if we're looking for names are here and connections are a different color, the color, like as color for clarity specifically, just so we can see the differentiations between what's a name and what's a contact, what's a connection and what's, something else. I'm just saying, you could have warm tones, brights, black and white, shades of gray or something, depending on what people's preferences are, like visual preferences for that. That's all I was thinking.
Yeah, but a question is also here, I can easily hide all the people, bring them back, and now I can do operations on them as you saw, right? So I have very, very easy ways that are non-upfront visual to let me know if I'm interacting with a category. The thing is, and this is also, it may be a bit off topic, and we need to get onto file formats in a minute. Humans were evolved, of course, in a very rich visual environment, basically the jungle. So when we go for a walk in a forest, our eyes, all these leaves, we don't count the leaves, we don't see all the details, but there's something in our visual system that makes it relaxing, even though the visual is extremely noisy, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
So once you put something different in there, once there's a purple flower, it sticks out a lot. So if we want something to stick out visually, if we needed to, we should do that. But if we add that kind of layer of visual complexity, like right now, all the people here are highlighted, so they're very strongly boxed. So they're literally colored, right? Is that necessarily what your eye would want when you're dealing with a different part of the space? Should you be able to toggle it on and off? No question. Should Tom, for instance, saying this with love and respect, Tom, to suddenly have a multi-vibrant rainbow of colors for different things? Absolutely. Right? It should absolutely be one of the options. Another option should be hiding all the stuff that's irrelevant, right? Only showing specific things. So that there's a myriad of options we need to go through together on this. But Mark, do you have something specifically on this, or should we go a little bit to the letter idea?
Yes, a couple of things brought up. One is you talked about doing alignment and stuff. Probably the thing you want more than anything else is a nudge tool, because actually putting things in the right place. One thing I've, several decades of watching people trying to work the information maps. Actually, the one thing they normally don't want the one thing they very rarely use, unless they are trying to make gridded structures, which is not normally what you're doing in an exploratory situation. The one thing you don't want is very fixed grids, because they never quite work. But what you do often want to say, I just need to move that, with a bit more control I got. So that's one observation on there. There's something interesting. You could look at something I know that Mark Bernstein does in his maps, which is he has a series of little routines. I think he calls them kibitzes. So every time something's moving, you say, oh, am I at a 45-degree angle to this? Or is there an association? So instead of actually having a snap to grid, which rarely pleases anybody because the grid's either too big or too small or whatever, it's sort of saying, oh, it's the environment is trying to say, oh, I think what you're trying to do is you're basically trying to put this near that. Another thing to look at is, and there's two aspects of color. One is that you'll never get everyone to like the same color. But also most people will my observation is that very few people will actually bother to take the time to customize the colors, because they just don't. So a very few will, and they'll do very elegant things with it. But I've worked in a tool space where there is extremely subtle color controls, and you can use saturation, all sorts of things, all sorts of variations. Very, very few people use it. They'd like it, but there's no getting around the fact that actually they don't, because I think there's a bit too much load in it. And one last thing is to think about is, in terms of toggling things on and off, one thing you can use is essentially having objects that are almost like touch objects. So it might be they're almost like a switch, or it might be that if I take something and touch it to something, it applies 5, 10 different criteria to it. It says that this thing's actually now a person. I didn't know it was a person. It is a person now. And because all the people are green, it's also going to be green. The other thing is with the color is contrast. Certainly as eyes age, you need more contrast. So that actually also has a severe effect on what colors you can really play with. If you've got a pass through, I would say you probably do want background colors rather than the text, but bearing in mind the contrast problem. Whereas if you go for less background noise, you can probably get away with much more subtle color, because the color stands out more carefully for you. But again, it goes down to personal preference and what people like. Thanks.
I'll address that really briefly, and then Randall. So we have talked at some point about the gestures, about it. You save the gestures that are yours, and you have a file you carry with you in different environments. I would assume, Mark, that it would be useful to do the same with colors. This is my color set. This means that, or whatever. To take your. Actually, this was my hypertext paper 2 years ago about your settings. It is when you're talking about high contrast as you get older, Mark. Of course, not for everyone, which is entirely your point. Sometimes you really need the high contrast, sometimes you don't. So, yeah, very cool. Brandel.
Um, I, as somebody who has, I mean, I'm not that helpful anymore, I guess, but when I was in the marketing department, I would go around and look at a lot of different people's, 3D files or their code and other things like that. And I have made the investment to just be as effective as possible with a complete as stock pot as possible kind of configurations of visual code editors as well as things like Maya and Blender and Adobe Illustrator and things like that. And so I do like when the colors are the same thing for people, although in those contexts it's relatively clear when you're using Monaco versus whatever else, Monachi versus Obsidian, for example, as color themes, what an H2 HTML tag looks like. Um, on the kibitzes you were describing, Mark, there's a really strong analog in Adobe Illustrator. I actually don't know whose would have come first, but if you have it turned on, then you can set specific angular rules so that you can use 30 or 45 or whatever. When I do isometric drawing, then I turn on the 30s. And in 3D apps, you have things like polygon or topographical relaxation. These are, there's a number of really sophisticated techniques and tools people have for being able to align and arrange and do things for purely visual reasons. And it's worth taking a look at those and being familiar with them as you're arranging things for things other than visual reasons as well, because a lot of it has been relatively well established there. So I would encourage, if you're looking at those things, to see what are the available things and what people do with them in practice in apps like Blender and Illustrator and other ones. I haven't used many VR DCC, digital content creation tool systems, but as those develop as well, being able to think about one, what they're doing, and two, how you would tilt those things more toward informational purposes is a fun exercise.
Yes. So I would like to talk a little bit more about the core theme for today, which is that letter. But also, there's been a bit of an email, especially with Brandel and Fabian, about file formats. And here's the thing. I don't want this to become a very, very technical session or community, but the point is, so far, 3D file formats are all about objects. We're trying to make it about knowledge, which means that also it has to be robust, and we don't know what a knowledge object is. A knowledge object can be the word potato, or it can be the model of the Empire State Building, right? We just don't know ahead of time, which is why, to me, learning from what Mark taught me about LaTeX, separating where something is from what something is really, really, really important. As you saw in the headset now, the citations in that letter are automatically in the space now because they are known objects. So this is something Tom was asking about. Why are those things there? The other ones are the glossary. These are terms that are defined. So there are many other things like this, like if someone chooses to include an image, that should not be just burnt into a page. It should have its own referenceability and displayability, right? So with that, I wonder if Brandel and or Fabian would like to talk a little bit about what they discussed via email, because towards the end of that discussion, Brandel was suggesting using the grand old format of HTML, which to me is incredibly exciting, because I could imagine the dream of an archival document, PDF or something else, very, very boring, having a little list of XYZ with IDs, and separately, let's imagine, just to be provocative. Okay, yeah, you go first, Fabian, but just in summary, really briefly, I could imagine a 5-page, in the future, academic paper that is 100 pages because 95 of the pages are metadata, for the sake of argument, right? Many of those pages are just different layouts of the same stuff. And many other pages are deep descriptions with annotations, quotes, and all kinds of stuff. So, Fabien, over to you.
I'll be quick because I think I mentioned it before, but I think there is quite a few different ways. But to summarize also the email for a bit of context for everybody. So we have a few different formats like GLB, like USD. We also have JSON. So there are ways to put 3D models in space, but we also have plain text. And it sounds a bit silly, and yet, for example, the V card, that is plain text, and we can put 3D coordinates in plain text. But I think it boils down to who is going to use that format. Because if it's somebody who is going to open Notepad or whatever text editor to edit it, or they're going to use a dedicated tool, or they're a professional developer, then it's not the same requirements. Because one is so complex that you need the dedicated tool, and thus it's more of a design of the UX of the tool. And the other is it's the file format itself. But my advice, which I think I mentioned a few times, is let's not invent the wheel when the wheels we already have bring us far enough. So if we do hit the end of the road and we don't have what some data is missing and it doesn't fit into, let's say, some escape hatch of the file format, we can try something else. But otherwise, I'm still not seeing what is missing in the existing formats, even if we push them to the limits. Thank you.
Fabian, this is something that you invented. I just stole it because that's what I do in this context. In a world of LLMs, forget the other two-letter acronym, things can be converted more often relatively easily, right? So in a certain sense, it doesn't matter as long as it's clear. So here we have XYZ. This is an example you made. And you've added rotation, which I'm not sure if we need, but what the heck? You know, this is just adding a little bit of space. And then the really important thing is just this. This is what I don't see in the traditional file formats. Because when you go to the glossary, to call it that, an ID can have an identifier, description, it could link to a local document, it can have this, it could have that, it could have the other. It's just, Fabian, with the greatest respect, you've really helped shake my head to look differently at a lot of ways. I'm trying to shake your head about 3D to say, it's knowledge of objects, like Marcus said, little silver spheres, where they are. Their color, their texture, their orientation, their size, their font, none of that is core to the knowledge. The knowledge is what they can explode into, right? That's why I want this to be super, 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 super tiny. Does that make more sense or not? I'm guessing not. Fabien's still not fully convinced. I mean, let me ask you this. For the testing that I'm doing with author reader, I can do whatever the heck I want because I own them, right? But my dream is that I do whatever the heck I want in an open way, so you can say, oh, that's rubbish, and you build a competitor, and we share the files. That's the dream. So I'm looking at plain text for XR. That's what I'm trying to do. And the notion of the glossary, it's so crucial. And Mark, I will thank you every day for it because you introduced me to how it works in LaTeX. Because all the citations are in a separate list, separate file even, and then you call them from the document. That means you can cite someone 20 times if you have to in a document, maybe look a bit stupid, but it's robust. It refers to the same one thing, right? Now, I want to be able to talk to you guys about what the ID would be, for instance. So if Tess and me share documents, and if these glossaries were originally the same, yeah, Randall, okay, we'll continue the discussion, and we'll probably end up doing it towards an HTML type of thing, because that's nice and open, and it was a great example. And okay, Fabian, so that means we revert to Tom. Bye, Brandel and Fabian.
Well, of course, since we've talked about things, I'm thinking about them too. The question I had earlier about the letter, is the recipient going to have a Vision Pro or 3D device to look at the letter with?
Well, considering that the recipients are, I expect the person can, but probably won't. So what we'll have to do is make sure it works well, do a walkthrough video that has mirroring, which we didn't do with Dave. It's just that it's such a different thing to experience than it is to imagine. And that's really, really tough.
Yeah, and the reason I'm speaking to that is that I think, if you can give them a overwhelming reason to put the headset on and to look at it that way and give them, that to me is the killer app, so to speak. And if there's, to say, look, this is a simple letter, but if you really want to see the dimensions of what we're thinking, put on the headset.
Yeah.
Because but then you have to create something that will make them go, oh, I never looked at the world this way before. And then that will start that conversation. That's all. That's what I'm saying.
One of the things I seem to remember Vincent talking about at the symposium was partly education in this country and how we kind of rushed into digital without having a clue what it is as an educational system. And several countries now, Denmark I think is leading the way, but also the UK are removing iPads because we're beginning to understand that pencils are very useful for much kind of thinking. So in reflection on what you're saying, Tom, I want people to spend a lot less time digital. However, when we fully go in, we should have a richer experience. So I really strongly agree with what you're saying. There should be something compelling and different.
I'm thinking specifically about this use case because you're trying to get his attention, right?
Sure.
So anything you can do that makes it look like, and one more thing.
Yeah. It kind of started for me anyway with this. So this is obviously
I just got one of those too.
they're kind of amazing, and it scared me now because I thought suddenly it was 8 o'clock. It's not. No, you're right, and you're being very provocative right now, which is the whole point of this. The thing is, in all the experiences of all the things we've done, the strongest reaction I get from people is when they can move a thing. And when you look around the way we organize our houses, we cluster. So spatial hypertext is really ripe for this, right? And we have to decide what to show and what to hide. So that goes to what we've agreed, what we talked about. I don't want to fake the letter too much, but I may add some more citations, almost spuriously, just to bulk it up a bit for the experience of viewing it in XR. But in a sense, a letter is very close to an academic document in the sense that it's making some assertions, trying to back them up. It's kind of an introduction, there's a conclusion. It's just a bit softer, right? Because we've been really looking at academic papers generally, and are we doing this or are we doing that? Now we're doing one single one. And Mark, thank you for your patience.
I think I think it'll burn off. It'll probably fly back to me. Oh yeah, no, I know what it was. I was thinking one of the things. I think the top of this slippery slope on which we now stand is that if we are going to have all this richness and depth, we're essentially sort of putting a marker up at the end of the road for word processors, which are all designed about basically making paginated output. If you're going to have a tool that's going to have all this richness of information underneath it, and somebody else, even if it's an AI, somebody else is actually going to be putting in everything you need, just so it's there, just in case you want it in that odd thing. That's actually, I think, quite different to our writing tools now. I don't know where it goes, but I don't see much future for, I don't think it's something you're going to build into Word. I think it would just break. There's only so much you can staple onto the card. So if we're writing for text that essentially is going to be remediated because it's just going to turn up in all sorts of formats, and this is different to the early sense we had in when it was about the 90s, where it was the idea of, write once, publish many, which was actually still about very established forms of output. But just the fact that I'm going to write this document, and I'm going to write it knowing that I'm going to have very high levels of addressability because I'm, for instance, essentially when I've written something, I'm going to want to put it into a different environment and look at it in a complete different way. For that to happen, all these little IDs that you've just put in there as, ID in italics, someone or something is going to have to create all that. So I think it's worth bearing in mind, and I don't think it's a bad thing. And I don't say this about web processes because I don't like them or something. I just think it's a natural changing of the guard. Here we are, we've got a product category that's probably reached the end of its life because it's basically tied to paper print, which in itself has reached a sort of a plateau, let's put it like that. So the enhancements are going to come in other ways in which we use our text. So our tools are really going to have to do that. Even if the primary writing experience appears to be a sort of narrative of text, it's going to need a much richer background to it than we're used to at the moment. Thanks.
I have heard that before, Mark, and I'm not sure. I agree in many respects, but I don't agree in all respects, because what we're looking at here is primarily a thinking space. And if you have too much stuff in space when you're trying to do one type of thinking, it's different from doing this. This is it's literally a typesetting space to go all the way back, right? That's really what it is. But it's also a thought setting space. Yes, Mark? No, you're muted. You're muted still. And still very much muted. And also muted. Okay, I'll have to click that, please. Yes, Mark? Sorry,
this that you've shown is fine, but that won't give you all this extra richness. So it's just the thing. I mean, I'm just making sure we don't lose sight of the fact that we can postulate having all this extra richness, but if we don't foster that, if we just concentrate on the surface layer experience, we won't get that.
No, I know. I've heard that. And the thing is actually building these things now and working in XR and here. When you write, you want to write on something. You want a substrate, right? The text really demands a substrate. And when we had to write some terribly long papers, Mark, for our PhDs, which are unnatural because they are a process that we have to go through. It's not really designed for someone to read. When we did our academic papers, they are generally shorter, but they're also in a very specific thing. When we write a section of a paper, we really try to focus on that bit, right? So to have it, okay, I kind of agree with the notion, Mark, that we want to write more spatially. But when we're trying to get a couple of thoughts in a sequence to make an argument or a point or an assertion, yeah, sorry, looking at Tom's. But what I'm saying is for this letter, for what we're doing now, what we're trying to do is something very specific, right? This person will get a PDF that has a really brief intro by a prominent person, so they're probably going to open the PDF. That has been labored over happily by me to make very clear points, not trying to go into forever. The idea is that this paper is trying to sell the idea that they should help invest in working in XR. So yes, we could then redirect them to our websites where we have many examples, brilliant work done over 2 years by brilliant people. The only thinking here is, okay, specifically, if this person opens this particular letter, it starts off floating in space, and then they click a thing, and it's now spatialized. Just that, what can that mean? That's all we're doing this month. It's a very specific thing. So I'm hoping we can have that person do what I've done, take the main paper to the side, and there will be things in space. Now, one thing that I've really discovered today in the dialogue and inspired by Dave Millard was that if you have a small thing that communicates the right information. This goes very much to what Tom was talking about. What is that? Is it just text? Is it color? Is it an icon? Is it whatever? But if you have something that does the good job, when you then make it bigger or expand, what is inside that box will be really, really important. Right? And that is a mini piece of paper, no matter how we wrangle it, even if it has a 3D model sticking out, which may be a good idea. So, exactly. So Mark is saying, what in the letter will show something not seen in page form? That's a really good phrasing, Mark. Thank you. One thing it will show, hopefully, is these are the things cited. They connect like this. So it's just that it's slightly spatialized. Is that useful? I don't know. But the idea here isn't to solve all of academia and XR. It's simply to give this person enough of an appetite to see potential. I've been very, very inspired artistically by the Knowledge Navigator Scully demo from way back, which was designed to give a feel of a future. Right? So it's you have the thing around it, now you have other things. Initially, everybody will be impressed, even this person we're talking about, because it's real, even though we've all known about it. Now the secondary thing, are you chunking it? Are you looking more at it? Are you seeing relationship? What is the secondary coolness is probably what we're looking for. Vincent has thoughts. Oh, I know, I can tell.
Can I extemporize for just a few for a minute or so? That's all right.
Please, please.
So really, it's bringing it back to the absolute, the raison d'etre, and as I spoke at the symposium, that we are in this incunabula, this period of massive change in how we communicate our primal form of media. And what we often forget is it wasn't just the printing press. That itself was an incredibly, became that the media was the message there. But we forget that it was the existence of print shops that allowed this mixing in this incredibly stratified medieval society where everybody knew their place. For very much for the first time, lots of merchants, scribes, scriveners, monks, clerics, etc., were meeting in the printing shop, and they had a shared format now that they all could see this thing and see their different ways that they could use this. And that was as much facilitated a lot of the ideas that then progressed to the Industrial Revolution, to the Renaissance, etc. So it was the meeting house that this printing press allowed people to meet. In the same way, what you're doing here, this is why I'm so interested in it, is because by the very nature of you taking print off the page and making it into a much more fluid thing, a physical representation of what we are all talking about, that AI is making, or the digital revolution is making information fluid. But you are having a physical, like going into the print shop and suddenly seeing, oh, that's how a printing press works. For people to be able to see print being moved around, with you being able to move information and saying it's not trapped in a 2D format, which we've spent the last 600 years. This is the freeing up of digital information, literally physically freeing it and getting that and showing people that, because it's always the proof is in the pudding for people, that when they see it, it clicks. And that's where your part as the new incunabula, that's what they were doing, was showing, look, you don't have to write things anymore. You can now print them repeatedly. You can tell somebody that, but if you're a monk who's been in a scriptorium, you're going to think, oh, well, is it kind of a quill that kind of dips repeatedly into it? And then you see this thing printing these things one after another. Suddenly, that's what you've got, the physicality of it. And so I really believe that what you're showing here is we can show people and demonstrate. So the demonstration itself, almost more than the around the edges, the genuine wow factor is that being able to pull and being able to get that across to the general public, or have that as an audience who can experience it. Even I think the a wider audience seeing your demonstrations of it, then it clicks. Just as that when they can figure out, oh, we're in this new incunabula, oh, we're doing it all again, right? Okay, then they've got something, they've got a narrative they can get hold of. I think that just becomes a key part of the. It's almost the message is the media here, that you're showing and saying this is the message. Thanks for coming to my very small TED talk.
I think that's phenomenal and very, very important. And I'm going to ignore what Mark said because I'm going to ask Mark a question based on what you said. One of the things that I think we all have a sense that would make sense is, let's say Mark helps here because of his expertise in the area of finding, let's say, 5 ACM hypertext papers that not necessarily all cite each other, that wouldn't happen. But if there's a bit of a chain, like maybe 2 or 3, that's it, right? And we put that in as an example. And then we do, Vincent, you're making me think of timelines because you talked about history, right? So we have that here. And ignoring the issues around all the data, Mark, we show that. But when you do that, we do have a little bit of a chain. But in addition to that, floaty in the space, we have Ted Nelson, Doug Engelbart, maybe a few other people. And the point of this little area, I don't know what I'm picturing over here, is kind of a bubble to give a new person in our hypertext community a sense of some of the people and papers. So we don't need a literal timeline like this, but we have the latest paper, and then we have the origin of this train in the back, just as a starting point. I think that would be really cool. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I'm not. That said, I'm not sure actually technical domains are as good for that. If you want to do that kind of thing, you better to go something like chemistry or to go into the arts, where argumentation is much more fine-grained, because often the work entirely depends on that. A lot of science, it's something I noticed that Dave brought up, is saying, yeah, well, actually people cite and annotate for all sorts of other reasons. It isn't literally just for the narrow quote. So I'm just wondering, because if it seems what you want is you want to visualize a citation chain to
Visualize.
Well, the spatialized doesn't matter because it's just data. You're just showing it in space.
No. I'm just.
You can't get the spatialization unless you have the data. So I'm trying to understand the data that you want. The spatialization comes for free once we've got the data. I mean, this is my point about WordPress earlier. The missing part is, sadly, we're all building on sand. If what we put underneath, if we put in the top of the hopper isn't structured.
Yeah.
So it's an inescapable problem.
It's not. It's not an inescapable problem, because just like with the invention of printing, before printing, you couldn't print something that wasn't put into metal type or wooden type. You would have to do that. There was a process. So to put data into this environment, there may also be a process, hopefully not as manual. But what I mean, for example, we put a node in, call it Ted Nelson. We make it a person. That's the category. Then we have a few citations to papers he wrote, birth date, maybe where he's from, basic human stuff that you can just get Wikipedia or that we happen to know. Put that in the space. Then we have the beginning of stuff, because one of the things you saw in even author right now, you can sort. You select a few things and you sort it, right? So I could imagine this whole bit on the side we're talking about now. You do a command to sort by time, and if something has time, then it appears. So in an ugly way, I could imagine Ted Nelson as one of those little things in space, right? Then you do the sort by time, and considering, thankfully, he's still alive, this thing becomes really thick. Not useful, but conceptually, he occupies this amount of time. And the paper was published here, right? Just a few toy things like this to begin toying with our brain about this. And then maybe Vincent will have some very, very old references that's related to this, a Gutenberg or whatever, would be far away in the room, that you would just literally have to either walk to or try to get up. to give you a sense of spatiality, because the spatiality is really, really hard to make useful. I think that's where we're struggling.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, well, it's interesting. You mentioned one of the problems that bedevil all sort of temporal display is temporal information tends to A, be lumpy, and B, have massively disparate separations between them. So, we could have a whole lot of things that happened this year, something in 1967 and then 32 million years BC. It's really, really difficult. You can't do that on a linear scale. Even on a log scale, it looks odd. You have to do sorts of accommodations, which, funnily enough, we do within the this is one of the things we do within infographics, because you deliberately change what would otherwise have to be a linear thing, but we do it in the conventions that the reader will understand. But
Yes.
I'm still not quite clear what you want with these citations. I mean, you should have most of Ted's stuff in your thing anyway, because they're in your thesis.
I do. It's just that I really greatly appreciate your perspective on this. But when we're talking about the timescales, what is really, really important to remind ourselves is we're talking about human timescales, right? And in human academic world, if you're studying the history of the universe, you have 13.8 billion years or whatever it is. You're not at the same time necessarily going to be studying the history of hypertext, right? So they are kind of envelopes within. So there are some cases. No, I'm not being facetious, Mark, at all. No.
I'm not suggesting you are. I would
Because
just say, from experience of actually doing the things you're talking about, albeit not in space, is that it's not quite as you imagine. Trust me, it just isn't. It's annoying, but it is that way.
I've done timelines as well. I have a massive one on the Doug Engelbart thing, right? And sometimes it's fuzzy. How you choose to display that is an issue, no question. But within what we're talking about here, right, it might push towards doing more research on this, right? So imagine this person opens the thing, it looks normal, presses the button or whatever. I mean, I really like the idea of, as you all know, some citations are in hard brackets with a number. Click on it, and then you get a pop-up. Thanks, Mark, for your idea, and that works in Reader now. Imagine if you're reading, and then there's a number in these angle brackets, and that refers to a spatial layout. So you click on that, and then you get that layout of the stuff we're talking about. You read further down, you click on it. Maybe it's the same stuff and it's a different layout. These are preset layouts.
Yeah, the thing you have to, or there's another strand you have to take into account, is citations that are essentially citations augmentations in the Bruce sense. So I actually quoted a paragraph from this paper, or I'm arguing against it, or I said that, as opposed to certainly in the sciences, a lot of the references are actually essentially provenance. I said, this thing exists. It actually happened. It's here. You can go read about it. It's not being made as an argumentation thing. What often happens is that's a lot of that would sort of be noise in your timeline, because you'd see lots of things that aren't actually what I think you're trying to show by this timeline. You're trying to say, no, this came from this, came from this. The most elegant way, I mean, I know one of the stuff I was doing in the chemistry department recently in the uni. One of the doctoral students there looked at the work that we'd done with Adam Wern and said, "Blimey!" And he went off, and I never saw the end, but within a week he'd got his very sort of hard-edged chemistry derivation tree of past papers, essentially into that sort of a display.
Yeah, but Mark, we don't have to worry about all that now. And one of the ways you and I look at things differently is, right now, this is theater. It's for one person for one letter, and we want to give, just like when you watch Sherlock. I'm sure you've seen the modern ones as well as I have. That some of the visualizations are nonsense, but they're inspirational, right? This is where we're at, and I really want to get Randall and Fabienne's buy-in for some sort of a XYZ knowledge thing. They're still arguing about it, which I greatly appreciate. So all it is, put on the headset, have a normal looking thing. You have maybe each section you click and you can open. Maybe, I'm not sure, that may be stupid. Maybe we do a few citation things. Doesn't even have to be that many. And maybe it turns out that the relationships are important. So the lines will have to be, like Tom was talking about, either colored or labeled. Maybe this, maybe that.
But I still don't understand what you want from me. But bearing in mind, this couldn't be a worse week for me. I'm absolutely stacked up. So if you give me a list of papers that you want clean data for, I can do that almost in a snap. Anything else is going to be rather hard until the end of this month.
If you can, Mark, what I would really like is a very current paper, ideally by you, that references something that has one more. So we just have three in the chain, right? And if they reference a seriously important person like Mark Bernstein or Ted or Doug, that would be really nice as well. Because that way, because I also refer to Doug in the text, of course. So that would be just useful for a bit of context, and maybe I can put a few more spurious items in space to see how it feels.
Okay, so but you're asking, right? I understand you have a picture in your head, but I'm actually not clear how that picture is being made, because what you're asking for, I think, is a sort of third or fourth order map.
Yeah.
So it's not the papers, it's actually going through building a constructional map.
If it's just three papers, right?
Yeah.
Where the first paper is Doug's 62 paper. Find someone who cites that, and then find someone who cites that paper. That's it.
Yeah, but you're not citing that paper. You're citing the first paper, are you not? So where do the extra papers get tied in? Because unless there's a bit of routine that's traversing the first paper to reveal the second one.
I can write a sentence in the letter that says, as we were inspired by Doug's paper, blah blah, which has been referred to by blah blah, and we're now discussing blah blah. It can be a sentence. It doesn't have to be more than that.
Okay.
But this is play. This is artistic, throwing paint around to see where we can draw a picture. And maybe we find that we need to change some data. Maybe we find it doesn't work. Maybe we need more color, maybe less. Somebody asked me to have arrows in author map, which I find horrifying, but also maybe useful. So I thank you. We're way over time today. I'm very grateful for your time as always. If you have anything specific by next Monday, that'd be great. Monday's the last day. From Monday onwards, I'll have 1 week of programming for this. And this week, they're doing a bit of cleanup to make these things possible. So have a good week, everyone. And Mark, that's very dramatic for you. Bye-bye.